Well, hello everyone. I'm here to talk about the lovely ESPN, that entertainment, sports, and programming network. Yeah, that one. Been around since 1979, worldwide leader in sports and the NHL. And talk about the travesty that was the scheduling on Sunday, May 14th, 2023. Now, we're talking conference semifinals for the NHL. It's game 6, Las Vegas and Edmonton. And this game had already been scheduled a few days before, and I was noticing it was kind of strange that it had a 10 p.m. start on the East Coast, which means 8 o'clock local time there in Edmonton. And I figured that was weird enough to begin with as it was. Well, there was a reason behind it, not a very good one. So ESPN's schedule that day was NBA in the afternoon. That's not a big deal. It wasn't going to do anything. And of course, ESPN, which I forgot about it up until they made mention of it, that ESPN does Sunday Night Baseball. And mind you, this is the middle of May. Baseball has only been in season for a month, so it's a very, very early, maybe not very early, but still an early season game that's being played. And I know it's a Western Conference matchup. It's Las Vegas. It's the Edmonton Oilers. But ESPN, in their infinite wisdom, decided to, instead of a baseball game that got out of hand at 9-1 by the ninth inning, carried over into the start time of that NHL game. So what does ESPN do? Well, the rational thing, which ESPN doesn't really do often, would have been maybe let's move this baseball game to ESPN2, finish it off here, and start a playoff game, mind you, which could be an elimination game for the Edmonton Oilers, and we'll take over from there. Well, their solution was start the NHL game, conference semifinals, game 6, elimination game, on ESPN2, and then also run a side-by-side of the baseball game and the hockey game going on at the same time, and have one reporter cover both games. Of course, this has received plenty of backlash over the past few days as of this recording, and I'm absolutely dumbfounded by this scheduling in the first place. ESPN, I don't understand why you're prioritizing actually, no, I do understand why you're prioritizing a baseball game over the NHL, but I'll get to that in a moment here. The fact that you did so, though, when it's a playoff game and the only game on for a Sunday, and you put on a generic baseball game, and this is not this is not a shot at the MLB or any of its fans. If you like baseball, cool. I'm not taking shots at the MLB here for this. And you decide to keep it going even after the game starts, in which I believe all 3 first period goals were scored during that split screen time. ESPN2 was pretty much playing nothing the whole entire day. You could have just moved it down to there and done that. But ESPN, I guess the contract with the MLB states that it can't be done. I don't really know about it. And of course, ESPN's excuse might be, well, it's a Western Conference game with 2 small market teams, one of which is a Canadian team. Okay, fine. We'll get back to you in a moment here. As for the NHL, clearly you guys learned nothing from the 90s and the early 2000s when you were on ESPN back then. And I would be willing to give it a benefit of the doubt if you still didn't have the same commissioner. Gary Bettman should have known that by going to ESPN, same thing with anyone else who was on the agreement terms with ESPN, that you were going to be the 4th sport that they were going to cover, period. The same thing happened in the 90s and the early 2000s pre-lockout. That's why you guys went to NBC. But I guess the money was just too good. Now, if you're trying to grow the sport, I don't understand how you're going to grow it when the game that has 2 players that went number 1 and 2 in the 2015 draft are starting at 10 o'clock Eastern time on a Sunday when people have to work the next day. Now, apparently the NHL asked ESPN to move it up to an 8 p.m. Eastern start time, which would have been fine and would have been decent. Apparently ESPN didn't want to do that. ESPN apparently also didn't want to switch with TNT to start the game on, I believe it would have been TBS or TNT, doesn't matter, the Turner Broadcasting Network. So the NHL instead now had to sit there and watch a fairly high-profile game go from getting its own channel to being on their secondary channel and split side by side. Now, hypothetically, and this is to both ESPN and NHL, what happens in the future if the excuse can't be, which once again, like I said, it was probably due to contracts, but if the excuse was a Western Conference game with two small market teams and one's Canadian, okay, what if in the future, in the playoffs, you end up with a matchup like Boston and New York, Chicago and LA, Detroit and Toronto? Yes, a few of those matchups are Eastern Conference matchups, so they might be earlier in the day just because that satisfies the market that those teams are located in. That being said, if you had a Chicago-LA game, it's out there in LA. Are you going to start that game at 10 o'clock at night when you have the city of Chicago, fairly big hockey market amongst them all? And would you start that at 10 o'clock? I'm being serious. Over a baseball game in May, in which there's 30 teams in baseball. They each play 162 games? Yeah, how many baseball games are there in a season? I don't feel like doing the math, but we're talking one out of well over 1,500 probably games that take place in a season at the beginning of May when there's really no implications whatsoever. So, ESPN, I really haven't had much respect for you in a while, and I kind of had a feeling this was going to come. I'm not surprised by it. But if you're going to attempt there to say you want to have the NHL playoff contract there and be able to promote these games, make sure put forth some effort here. If it's the playoffs, please put forth some effort for it. As for the NHL, I'm sure you guys probably can't restructure your contract at this point, but how could you guys not try to make an effort to make playoff games have some importance if it's a game 5, 6, or 7, if it's a potential elimination game? This should have been seen from the beginning that you guys were never going to be back in a spotlight with ESPN, no matter how much money they threw at you, no matter how much they begged for you to come back. This should have been seen as writing on the wall from the start. You're never going to grow the sport if you can't even get two of the top profile guys from the 2015 draft in at a prime position there on a Sunday. That's really all I have to say. I don't know what could be done at this point. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Like I said, it's probably due to contract reasons, and I'm not surprised if that's the case, but something needs to be done better. Otherwise, the NHL is going to fall back once again to being super, super irrelevant here because ESPN's never going to give them the time of day. And I understand the NHL, I'm a realistic fan. It's never going to be probably as popular as MLB, NBA, or the NFL. I get that. I'm willing to accept that. But you can't sit there and say we want the sport to grow when the effort's never going to be there. But that's all I have to say. Feel free to comment if you like there, guys. Thanks for watching. I will catch you next time. See ya.